In the quiet alley between two clay walls, near the edge of a small village, lived an old farmer named Koji. His hands were worn and knotted with age, but they moved with surprising grace as he worked in his garden early every morning before the sun climbed high above the earth. One day, a young woodcutter came to visit him. The youth had recently returned home after years away, seeking respite from city life and hoping to find clarity among familiar surroundings. Koji had heard of the woodcutter's return but had never seen him since he left for the distant towns as a boy. The woodcutter arrived on an unremarkable afternoon when the sky was pale and the air held no breeze. He walked slowly, looking down at his feet as if each step might lead to something profound. Koji noticed him from inside his garden, watching through a small hole in the clay wall where he often placed dried herbs to dry. When the woodcutter reached the alley's end, he stopped and looked around hesitantly before approaching the wooden door with its rusty metal latch. He knocked gently once, then waited, shifting from one foot to another. Koji opened the door himself after a moment, his eyes softening when he saw who it was. "Come in," he said without much flourish, gesturing for the young man to follow him into his small yard where rows of vegetables thrived under careful cultivation. They stood side by side in the quiet space as Koji pointed out different plants with names that held no special meaning to the woodcutter, but were important to this older man. "This one is good for colds," he said, breaking off a leaf and handing it to the youth who looked at it curiously before putting it back. After they had walked in silence through much of the garden, Koji turned towards the wall where his herbs hung drying, plucking down several samples and holding them out. "These are for you," he offered quietly. The woodcutter accepted the bunches carefully, but did not immediately understand why such a small gesture should matter. Koji then moved to sit beside an old stone bench near the end of his yard where sunlight filtered through leafy branches, creating dappled patterns on the ground. He patted the spot next to him and waited for the woodcutter to join him. They sat in companionable quiet as pigeons cooed from above. After a while, Koji spoke again. "When I was young like you," he began without looking at his visitor directly, "I thought myself invincible. The world was only what it seemed on the surface." He paused and looked down into his hands resting in his lap. The woodcutter watched him carefully but made no move to interrupt or speak. There was a weight to these moments that felt heavier than anything Koji could easily explain with words. Eventually, Koji continued softly, "But there's more beneath the ground here," he said, pressing one hand into soil at his feet as if demonstrating something profound yet simple, like roots unseen. He stood then and walked over to an old wooden wheelbarrow resting against the wall. He began sorting through its contents, pulling out various tools and small plants with deliberate care. The woodcutter watched him for a time before getting up quietly himself and helping Koji organize his garden tools methodically without being asked. Together they worked side by side until shadows lengthened across their path of work. As evening approached, the woodcutter helped Koji wheel some pots out to line a part of the alley that needed attention. They bent together then straightened once more, looking over what they had done with satisfaction but no fanfare or boastful words. The last light left the sky as twilight settled around them like a soft cloak. Koji finally handed something small and wrapped in cloth back to the woodcutter, who looked at it closely before tucking it into his shirt pocket. Neither spoke much more after that. There was little need. Koji closed the door behind him when the woodcutter stepped out into darkness, only briefly calling back, "You know where I am if you want to talk," as softly as a breeze passing through leaves. The young man nodded once and walked down the alley alone, its edges growing dark quickly around him. He paused at the end of it for a moment, feeling the earth under his feet more deeply than ever before. Then he continued on into night's embrace with something lighter in his step, though nothing had been explicitly said that day between man and garden or elder and youth.
You're listening to the Empty Teahouse. A single star appeared in the sky as if turning on a tiny light for him. On a cold winter night, Beneath a sky thick with stars and the faint glow of the moon, a noodle stall hummed softly in an alley behind a bustling market.
On a cold winter night, beneath a sky thick with stars and the faint glow of the moon, a noodle stall hummed softly in an alley behind a bustling market. The steam from boiling broth rose into the chill air, mingling with whispers of laughter and clinks of spoons against bowls. Old Lee, the noodle seller, was hunched over his fire, ladling out noodles into steaming bowls for customers who appeared and disappeared like shadows. At the stall's corner sat a young woman wrapped in an old wool coat that no longer kept her warm. Her name was May, and she worked as a seamstress nearby. Her hands were rough with thread and needlework, yet they trembled slightly under the chill. She often came to Old Lee's stall for a bowl of hot noodles on these nights when her home felt too large and too empty. Tonight, instead of waiting her turn like usual, May sat at a small table alone, staring into her nearly empty bowl of broth without eating. A few strands of noodle floated aimlessly in the warmth. Old Lee noticed her hesitation and watched her for a moment from behind his stove. Without speaking, he took up an extra ladleful of noodles and added them to May's pot, then returned quietly to his work. The sound of the ladle hitting the bowl made him pause, but not long enough to glance back at her. May felt eyes on her, looked up, met Old Lee's gaze across the stall, a nod from him acknowledging something unspoken. She smiled softly and lifted her spoon to her lips, bringing warmth to both mouth and hand. She ate slowly, savoring each bite in the quiet of the night. Outside, the world moved on. Inside the alley, the stall hummed with its usual rhythm of serving and eating. May lingered longer than she usually did, until there was no one left but her and Old Lee. He had stopped stirring his pots, watching her finish the last noodle from another angle. When she set down her bowl, he pushed a cup of tea in front of her without looking up, continuing to tend to his fire as if it were any other night. The steam curled around him like an old friend. She took the cup in both hands, letting the heat soak through to her skin. She said nothing but felt grateful nonetheless. It was not what she needed to hear or see, nothing more than a small action, yet it held the weight of a secret shared between them. The acknowledgement of a presence amidst absence, the warmth against cold. Outside, night deepened as they sat there in silence, each wrapped in their own thoughts and the comfort of the noodles. May finally got up to leave when she saw Old Lee reaching for more coals to stoke his fire into brighter embers. As she stepped out into the cold air, her hand brushed against the wooden frame of the stall door just as a gust of wind caught the paper lantern above them, causing its flame to flicker briefly but not falter. The light from it swayed back and forth, casting shadows that danced along the alley walls.
The lantern flame swayed once, then steadied again. In the quiet alley between two clay walls, the air was still and cold. Near the end of a long winter day, shadows crept along the ground where patches of ice had melted into small puddles.
In the quiet alley between two clay walls, the air was still and cold. Near the end of a long winter day, shadows crept along the ground where patches of ice had melted into small puddles. Here, under a narrow slice of blue sky, sat an old man with weathered hands holding a faded notebook. Beside him was a young woman, her face shadowed by the brim of her straw hat. The old man's name was Jean, and he had lived in this alley for as long as anyone could remember. He had once been a beekeeper but now spent his days writing in that tattered notebook, watching people pass or not at all, never moving from the small patch of ground beside him. Winter nights were long and cold, but Jean found solace in the quiet. The young woman's name was May. She had come to the city with hopes of finding work, away from the hardships of her village home. Today she carried a basket filled with fresh vegetables for sale at the nearby market. The alley seemed quieter than usual today, and as she walked past Jin's spot, he looked up and met her eyes. Jean reached into his pocket and pulled out an old pen. He offered it to May without saying anything. She paused, looking down at him from under her hat brim. Her hand came slowly toward the pen, then paused again before finally taking it between her fingers. "Thank you," she said softly, holding the pen as if unsure what to do with it now that he had given it to her. Jean smiled and nodded slightly, his eyes warm despite his weathered face. He watched her for a moment more until she started moving towards the market again. The sun was lowering itself in the sky, painting the alley walls gold and crimson hues for only a few moments before retreating completely behind buildings and hills. As May walked away, Jean continued to write, his pen making soft scratching sounds against the paper. But when he looked up after a while, there was a change. Something in his expression softened as if part of him had followed her out of that alley. May sold most of her vegetables without much fuss that afternoon but found herself returning early with some remaining bunches and roots. She came back to Jin's spot once more, placing the basket gently beside him before sitting down on a wooden crate nearby. She said nothing at first, just looked over at Jean, who had stopped writing now to look at her curiously. "Why did you give me that pen?" she finally asked softly, still holding it in her hand as if expecting him to take it back any moment. Jean shrugged. "Thought maybe a writer should have more than one pen," he replied simply, then added after some thought, "And you needed one." May laughed quietly, but there was something almost sad about the sound. She looked down at her hands, then back up at Jean with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You gave me something else too," she said slowly, placing the pen carefully on top of his notebook. Jean frowned slightly, not understanding what she meant. May stood up finally and adjusted the basket on her arm. "Thank you again," she said more firmly this time before continuing down the alley towards home. Later that evening, when Jean went to rest for the night, he found a small packet tucked under his notebook near where May had been sitting. Inside were pieces of dried flowers wrapped carefully in old newspaper. Meager but meaningful offerings from someone who didn't quite know how else to show gratitude or share warmth with another soul. As Jean packed away his things for bed, he took out the pen once more and held it lightly between his fingers, smiling faintly into the darkness. Then he placed everything back neatly where it belonged before lying down on his straw mat under a single candle flickering in the cold room beside him. He closed his eyes as the flame cast long shadows across the walls, dreaming perhaps of another day when she might return and sit again beside him. Outside, snow began to fall softly against the clay walls outside Jin's door. In its silence lay the quiet rhythm of a city moving through winter into spring, each season turning but life always finding its way.
The snow settled quietly over the closed market stalls. Under the dim glow of evening light, Mary set her small basket beside the wooden bridge that arched over a quiet stream.
Under the dim glow of evening light, Mary set her small basket beside the wooden bridge that arched over a quiet stream. The water moved softly below, its surface barely stirred by the cool breeze. She had come here to collect stones for her garden path, preferring this place where she could move quietly and think. Across the stream, John was fixing the old rope handrail on the other side of the bridge, his hands working methodically despite the chill in the air. Mary's eyes met his as he looked over at her, a nod acknowledging her presence without any words exchanged. She picked up a smooth stone from the ground and slipped it into her basket. John paused from his work when she stood to cross the bridge, stepping lightly onto the worn planks that creaked slightly under her weight. He held out a hand to steady her, though not needed, as she passed by him. Mary's face softened at this small gesture of care. "Got much more?" he asked without looking directly at her. "No," she replied, "just these few." Her voice carried the quiet satisfaction one feels with simple tasks well done. John returned to his work while Mary settled herself in a spot where sunlight pooled on stones. She began arranging them carefully beside her basket, each piece chosen for its shape and color as much for practical reasons as aesthetic ones. John's steady progress across the bridge was almost rhythmic, stopping once more near her to adjust the rope. "Mind if I sit?" he asked gently. Mary nodded toward a space next to her, clearing an extra spot on the ground with stones from her basket. As they sat side by side, neither spoke, but each felt the silent connection of shared attention and respect for their surroundings. The fog began to roll in along the stream, softening edges and blurring distant trees into indistinct shapes. A chill wind blew through, sending leaves skittering past them both unnoticed yet somehow familiar. They watched as the light grew dimmer, coloring everything around them with a deepening blue that seemed almost liquid. Mary turned her attention back to the stones, selecting another to place in the space beside her. John glanced at this and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small piece of string. He began tying knots along its length with surprising dexterity, creating an intricate pattern without any particular goal other than to pass time thoughtfully. As darkness crept up around them, they prepared to leave their shared spot on the bridge's edge. Mary packed her stones back into her basket, feeling a sense of accomplishment at how neatly she had arranged them and then reassembled them again for transport home. John finished his work with the string, tucking it away once more in his pocket. They crossed over the wooden planks one last time before parting ways, Mary heading towards her garden path, and John making his way down the stream toward another day's labor ahead. The sound of water moving gently beneath the bridge was all that connected them now as they walked away into the night.
Somewhere down the stream, the water whispered over smooth stones. The winter evening fell early, and the air was cold. Near a small village stood a noodle stall run by an old man who had once been a fisherman.
The winter evening fell early, and the air was cold. Near a small village stood a noodle stall run by an old man who had once been a fisherman. His name was Maiko, but everyone simply called him Fish. Tonight, he sat alone behind his cart, steam rising from bowls of steaming noodles as snowflakes settled around him. A young girl named May approached the stall, her breath forming tiny clouds in the air. She clutched a small wooden bowl tightly in her hands and a threadbare scarf wrapped around her head. Her cheeks were pink with cold, but her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she looked at Fish's noodles through the fog of steam. "Good evening," May said softly, stopping just out of reach from the warmth of his fire. Fish glanced up from stirring a pot of soup and offered a small smile. "Welcome, little one. What brings you here this night?" May hesitated, her eyes darting around before settling back on Fish. "I was told there might be something special in your noodles tonight." Fish raised an eyebrow but continued stirring the broth gently. "Special? No one else has mentioned such a thing to me." He paused and looked into her small bowl. "You brought your own bowl?" May nodded, her fingers tightening around it. "I do not like to leave my home empty-handed," she said quietly. Fish chuckled softly. "Well then, let's see what we can fix for you." With a practiced hand, Fish ladled soup into May's bowl and placed some noodles on top. The aroma of fish broth and fresh vegetables filled the air around them. He handed it to her with his usual warmth but noticed she didn't reach for chopsticks. She gazed at him, her eyes wide with gratitude and something else he couldn't quite put a name to. "Is there something you need help with?" Fish asked gently. May's face turned slightly red. "I was hoping that maybe you could teach me how to eat your noodles properly," she said shyly. Fish's smile grew wider. He motioned for her to sit on the stool beside him and started showing her how to grip chopsticks, dip them in soy sauce, and twirl a noodle around. Each movement was careful and deliberate, as if he were teaching not just the technique but also an unseen rhythm of patience. As they ate together under the dim light cast by his small fire, Fish told May stories about fishing on clear lakes, the sound of waves at night when he used to live by the sea. The conversation flowed easily between them, filled with shared silences and gentle laughter. The evening wore on into late hours, but neither noticed the passing time. Outside, snowflakes continued their soft dance against the darkening sky, whispering secrets of cold air and quiet nights. As they finished eating, May thanked Fish again for more than just his noodles. She left with a full belly and warm hands from the fire, her eyes reflecting something she had found here that wasn't in any bowl or pot. Fish watched her go, nodding to himself as he cleaned up. A stray snowflake landed on one of his graying hairs, melting instantly into nothingness against his skin. The stall grew quiet once more, but for a while longer, the warmth lingered, and so did the scent of noodles cooking in fish broth.
The lantern flame swayed once, then steadied again. Shadows lingered long after the stars faded, as if holding on to each other. The lamps dim at the empty tea house. Until tomorrow.